Good morning, afternoon, and evening to our listeners across the globe. Welcome to in12d podcast. Today we're season 2, episode 10. My God, time is flying, and we have a great, and not a great, but an awesome person with us today in the studio. I'll pass on the buck to my co-host, Susie Vaughn from Ireland. She's also co-hosting the show with me. Susie?
Thanks, Ramsey. Oh my gosh, I think I'm starting to repeat myself because every week we seem to go from good, better, better. Like it just keeps on getting better and better over here at in12d. This week's guest really is inspirational for me. We met at the Science and Consciousness conference, and I've been kind of really intrigued to learn more about her personal journey. So it gives me great pleasure to warmly welcome Krista Stanley, who's based in New York. Krista has a PhD in wisdom studies, working with cutting edge consciousness beyond the brain research. And she's also developed the art and craft of mediumship, and as well as a lot about dreaming. So that's what we're going to touch on over the course of this conversation. Everything from mediumship, science and consciousness, and slipping into the dream world. So it'll be a really interesting conversation, and we're so glad you're here, Krista. Thank you for saying yes.
Thank you for having me. I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you.
Cool. Well, Krista had an amazing kind of shift from her ordinary to extraordinary life, and how she got to that beyond ordinary. I'm really interested in learning more about that. So I know from your bio, Krista, you had a 30-year corporate career, and then something must have shifted, or something started to emerge that moved you beyond that stage of your, I suppose, evolution, let's say. Would you take us there? Would you share some of that?
Yeah. As a kid, I had this ability to kind of just know things, and that I wouldn't be old enough to know, or have the experience or acquired knowledge to know. Mediums call it claircognizance. And I just thought everybody could think that way. But the way it manifested, I never really paid that much attention to it. Nobody could explain it to me. It just kind of happened, and it happened spontaneously. It was very random. But I noticed when I was in the corporate world, I worked in the capacity of a manager. And what I was noticing was that I could tell when the train wreck was going to happen way before other people could tell when it was going to happen. I knew when somebody had something to say that they weren't saying it and it was important to say. I knew when something needed to come forward to advance the whole project. It was things like that that coworkers didn't necessarily have. And I became very curious about the dynamic, how that actually works, because it was incredibly helpful. It just provided so much assistance, like precognitively, like before something was actually going to happen. And it kind of tied into what I was experiencing as a kid. So in my mid-40s, I went back to school because I wanted to find out what this was about. And what I wanted to know was how it worked. So it was like, how does this physically manifest in us? And what are we tapping into exactly? And so that was what began my journey in my studies, which were very far-flung, and pointed me into the direction of quantum entanglement and entangling with a field of consciousness or information or a oneness. Religions talk about this all the time. And I think that consciousness studies is beginning to really expand beyond a materialist understanding, into what's called a post-materialist understanding that consciousness is fundamental and primary, and that we have the ability, we're wired to be able to tap into and receive information from the field. And so that's where my studies led me.
Wow. And was that kind of the key then for you when you really kind of, I suppose, made it the focus of your attention, like doing your studies and exploring it across multiple different
I think that one of the main turning points for me was somebody, when I was writing my dissertation, which was essentially about how do we get into the flow? How do we disconnect from logical reasoning temporarily and move into this flow? That's how I would describe it. You do it through meditation, you do it through dreams, you do it through altered states of consciousness. And somebody said to me, you should research mediums, because they just do this like automatically. They just switch and then they're getting information. And so I didn't know what a medium was. And I went to, to several demonstrations, and I was shocked that something that was so random for me was practiced for them. Like they had trained in it, and they could do it. They had an automaticity with it and an accuracy that was just phenomenal. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll take a couple of classes, because then I'll be able to write about it better in the dissertation. And once I started taking the classes, I thought, oh, I think this is what has been happening. And then I just started to explore it more deeply. I had to train in it, because there's a training aspect in terms of getting out of the way, getting really quieting our mind and allowing the information to come in. And my curiosity really was with how it shows itself in our daily life, through synchronicities, through having a dream, and then you almost meeting your dream in your real life. And for me, there's information there, and there's meaning, and we have to learn how to track it. And sometimes we're so floored that it's actually happened that we stop there. We just say, wasn't that the most phenomenal thing? I just had a dream about my friend, and then I ran into my friend, and that is just so amazing. But because we don't really believe that there's something happening there, we don't follow it. And for me, in my work, it's training people on how to follow it, to recognize that we can do it, to demonstrate the actuality of it, and then to train people on how to kind of track and follow the information that's coming into their life. Because my theory is it's informing you for a very specific reason, and it's helpful. It's very helpful.
Sometimes it's scary too.
Because you can be met with something that you don't really want to be met with, like you think you're not ready for. I would say anything that comes into your awareness in this way is something that you're ready for. Sometimes we'll push it off. And I would be one who would do that, to push it off for years. And then it kind of keeps coming in. It keeps coming back in some way. And that's the tell. That's where you say, people say things that come in threes, better listen to it. It's that kind of thing. If you haven't mastered it or moved beyond it or learned from it, then you really need to, then it'll keep coming to you until you move through it.
Let me ask you a question regarding mediumship, since you mentioned it and you trained in it and you write about it. Has your mediumship transformed into a just all-knowing, or are you still dependent on a communication with spirit when you have a question or for something to pass on?
My boundary was very, very thick because I didn't like what was happening to me because I didn't understand it as a kid. And I grew up in a Roman Catholic household, so that made it a little bit more challenging in terms of understanding the dynamic at work because of that belief structure. And so I had a very thick boundary, and I'm a skeptic. And I studied something called evidential mediumship, which requires the medium to give evidence about who's coming through. And so for me, I maintain a very strong boundary. And so if I'm with somebody who would like some information, then I will tap into the field. I'll access the information. But I think there's a little bit of a moral code here. You know, like if it's not meant to be out there, then I don't necessarily get it, or I'm not training my attention to it. So there's a little bit of a difference. I don't get like prophecy sorts of things, or that's not how it's moving through me. And I think part of the training is learning what it is that you're supposed to be doing with it. And for me, what I've discerned is that I'm supposed to be teaching people how to recognize it, that we use that it moves through our body. The mediums call it the clairs. So you have like 7 clairs. There's clairvoyance, claircognizance, clairsentience, when you can feel something in your body, clairalliance, you can smell it, or gustinance, you can taste it, and clairaudience, you can hear it. And all of these are all mechanisms of transference of information. And usually 1 or 2 of them we're particularly strong at. They're like our primaries. And in training, you really have to raise your awareness to all of those different ways in which the information can come into our own personal awareness.
Okay.
Yeah. That's pretty cool, like, isn't it? When you realize, you know, that this, for me, that it's like the intuition or the information that you were tapping into, it's even greater and it's a bigger field than, you know, what might have been happening kind of on and off before. Once you start to train in it, you realize that it's okay, I can really open that gateway, or I can access that field of information. And what blew my mind, because Ramsey and I met during a evidential mediumship training over 2 years, and like you, I was a complete skeptic. I kind of didn't want it to work, if I was really honest, because it was something that I was kind of like, oh my God, what's the point in that, you know? Which is kind of crazy, because it was more fear-based than anything else. But I'll never forget it. The first time you kind of get the information coming through your sense of smell or sound, like when it's beyond kind of what you were used to before training, that really blew my mind. Like, it really shifted things phenomenally, because, you know, why am I suddenly smelling donuts, you know? And I'm wondering, will I say this to the person sitting? And then it was the piece of evidence that clinched it for the sitter to know exactly, yeah, this is definitely, you know, my aunt or whatever. And so it's a real layered information and energy that you're accessing. So it does change your perception of
absolutely
everything.
It's like a funnel, you know, it's like moving from a funnel to this, just or opening the funnel, making the funnel much larger. And I think also, a lot of times you'll get information, or you'll give information to a client, and they'll say, well, I don't know what you're talking. I don't know what that is. Yeah. And the meaning is not always right front and center. And I think that throws us. We're very accustomed to linear thinking, and A leads to B leads to C. And we understand at the end of that, we've got it, and we have the meaning. And with this work, that's not necessarily the way it is. It's more like a jigsaw puzzle. And so these little pieces come in, and if you stick with it, then you start to see how these pieces fit together, and it blows your mind. You cannot believe how creative the cosmos, or whatever this is, and how imaginative and inventive and how pointed it can be. And it's in the the tracking and following it where that's really it cultivates wonder. I just think that that's an amazing thing to have grow in our system, in our bodies, in our awareness, is this idea of wonder. And this certainly does that.
Yeah. See, I just want to add on to all this thing is that you said when you open the gates for it. So we open the gates and they come in, and some people retreat and no, I don't want to see it. But then their curiosity is much stronger than their fear. Then they'll go back into it.
Yes.
And once that is open, and based on my experience, and I'm not sure how it is for everybody, is that it was there. I did my evidential mediumship. I met Susie, and then afterwards, it started to evolve into a knowing. I arrive into a place and I look at it and I go, oh, there's something over here that I need to do. I don't know what it is. It's a simple one. I was telling Susie at one time is that I got an itch to go to a store. I needed to buy a couple of shirts and stuff like that. And it's like, no, go now. So I ran to the store and everything that I wanted was on special. And while I was picking them, I said, oh, one of them is going to be for free. But I got home and I checked my bag and I was looking at my receipt and one of them was not punched. And I go, oh, wow. It's like there's something that if you accept, it kind of guides you through life without having any resistance on anything, basically. Just accepting it.
Robert Moss, my dream teacher, had a word for that. It's called shamanic shopping. And I love to do that. You get a hit and it's like, or you have a dream and there's turquoise all in the dream. And then, an action plan on a dream is really important because you're honoring what is coming to you through your dream. And so I'll go out and do a little shamanic shopping. I'll find a little piece of turquoise or something that, and it's amazing what I'll find. Like the item will be there, right there for me. There's something I want to say, though, that I think is very important about what you brought up about this idea of fear. And hearing what you want to hear or not hear, getting information that you don't really want to get. It's very important as people begin to do this work and receive other people's getting the information and giving it to them. Our body resonates with truth, with our own truth. And there are certain physiological markers of connection and being really connected with your soul and with the truth, your own truth. You cry spontaneously, you get goosebumps, the hair on the back of your neck goes up. You can also feel difference in temperature around you. And I always tell clients, if I say something to you that doesn't resonate, then you just let it go. Don't hold on to that. You want to pay attention to the things that make you go, oh my God, there's something here. And it might not make any sense. And that's where you have to start tracking it and paying attention to how it comes in. Because the information doesn't come in a linear way. It's a circular kind of language that comes in many different ways. And we're a tuning device. And part of the work that I do is helping people understand their own tuning device and listening to that, because that's how they find their path. That's how they connect in with what they really want to do, with what they want to shed. It's not from what I say, it's from what they feel.
Do you think on some level that it's like, when you're sitting, whether you're doing it online or in person, but you're the receiver and the other is the sitter, and then there's this kind of opening between the two people, concerned. And so there's a level of receptivity. Like I noticed with some people that I was working with, I felt they weren't as receptive as others. And so when the sitter was receptive, I could just keep like letting the information flow through. I wasn't trying to make sense of it or put it all together. I was like just delivering the package, so to speak. And other times when I've been doing it with a less receptive sitter, it's like a staccato. It's like stop, start. I don't know. So the information may not always flow the same from one person to the other. Like, so I think that was something that I was aware of. I couldn't see how I could change it. Maybe it was something in my mind that was creating the sort of the stop start sort of feel to it.
Yeah. Scientists would say it's entanglement. That would be entanglement. When it's hooked in. But there are lots of reasons why that kind of entanglement doesn't happen. If somebody, some people, if you don't give them the name of their loved one, then it's not legitimate. Like if you could give them all other information, specific information, but if you don't have the name, then they don't really buy it. But that's their own belief structure. And so that's always going to enter the field. And hypnotists would say that you want, with a client, you definitely want to create a kind of a symbiotic sort of situation, because the subconscious mind will not let any kind of advice or suggestion through if the client doesn't feel some sort of, not a lure necessarily. I can't think of the word now that they say. But it's really important to, like a rapport. You have to develop a rapport. Yes. And sometimes that's hard with people. Every person comes in with a different thing and with a different need. And I have found sometimes the key is to really stay with the spirit world in that way. If I'm working not psychically, but with the spirit world, to stay with the spirit world, because they'll be able to bring something in that unlocks something. And then you can feel the whole session just open up and flow. But it's hard for us to do that ourselves. Because there can be a lot of interference, and it's the interference that prevents the entanglement.
Although I don't do mediumship anymore, when I used to work with clients, I used to connect hours before.
Yes.
And get the information prior, so that I don't get entangled with their emotion, their requirement, their fears, and whatever they're working with, so that I'm alone with spirit, and then the information comes in. And then when I sit with them, of course, the rapport has to come in from because I studied NLP. So I kind of work on a rapport basis, and then more information will start to come in based on additional questioning from them.
Yes.
But I do receive most of the stuff earlier.
Yeah. Sometimes in the morning, I'll receive information when I'm meditating. Usually I'll just let it go, because for me, this work is alive. I don't know what other word to say, but it is so present and active and immediate. And sometimes when things come in during the meditation, I'll have like a snapshot of it. Like I'll remember, that came in through the meditation, but it's a snapshot. It's like static. And the trick for me is to then move from the static, that is a piece of information, and it's like, wait, how is that manifesting right at this moment in time? And so that's part of the training. That's a kind of a trick, because we can get stuck in our memory, and that's not where I want to be. I want to be in the immediacy of the field and what's transpiring in that moment. It's an attentiveness and a presence that the work. That's what the work is, to try and get yourself to that place.
Yeah, I really felt, for me personally, the kind of unfolding of the mediumship was a byproduct of studying meditation, practicing a lot of meditation, and exploring higher states of consciousness. And it kind of came in, out of left field, let's say. I was like, oh, wow. Almost like I was almost tricked into doing it. I know you're not getting tricked, but it was just the way it happened.
The trickster is pretty powerful, especially if we're resistant.
Yeah, like I had to
say, wait a second, was I just tricked into that? I certainly was tricked into the mediumship. I can't tell you how many times I said, I'm not doing this. Because you know what? You don't know what's going to come through. You have no idea. It's incredibly vulnerable. And somebody could be sitting across from you saying, I don't know what you're talking about. Or no, I don't understand that. I don't understand that. And you guys have been there when you're doing that. Yeah. And so many times I said, no, I am not subjecting myself to this. And then there was something that would kind of continually push me along. And sometimes I was genuinely tricked. So the trickster can be a very potent foil in our trajectory to what it is we're supposed to be doing.
When I found our teacher, she was in Holland, I signed up for what I thought was something to do with awakened mind. And she had been doing a lot of work, on the brain science and awakening, really kind of, it was all about brain science, and it was about, higher states of consciousness, and, and it felt more like it was going to be brain training, awakened mind. It did have a second M. It was like AMM. I didn't get to like what the third M was until the first session. And I was in a breakout room and I was like, what are we doing? And I was like,
that's a true trickster. That's a great story.
I was like, how did I get here? And I thought I'd get kicked out because I was like, well, I'm obviously in the wrong room now. But then it's amazing. My curiosity kind of got the better of me. I was like, well, I've paid. I might as well hang out here for a while. And I was really surprised when I was at ease, because I think having a meditation practice for me really helped me to do that with a lot of ease, and then the info would just be there and I just, spit it out or whatever. But I'd love to ask you, how does it, for me at that point when I was still very skeptical and resistant, I remember like over and over in my mind, I was like, what's this good for? What is this good for? How is this going to be of benefit to people? Or, I'd never really experienced it myself in my own life before that. And I had a dream, and it was a really lucid dream that I had that felt like it was going on for hours. If I gave you the dream now, it's a very long dream, right? But by the end of it, I really knew who the person in the dream was, even though I didn't know him when he had been alive. I knew of him, right? But we wouldn't have known each other personally. And I woke up and it was so clear that, he had passed kind of recently enough. And I could really feel like reach out and let his family know, And I was like, oh, no way am I doing that, And I sat in meditation with that piece of information, and I really had to get centered and calm. And I was like, okay, what should I do here? And I thought, well, if I'm still calm and it's still really clear to me, I'll just pass it on. And that was a huge shift for me, because when I realized the effect it had on the people that got that message from him, because we went ahead and we scheduled a proper sitting as well. And the information just flowed in, it was really easy. And I saw how much it helped, and that really shifted how I saw it all. Then I got over myself a bit. So, have you seen that in your work, Krista? Have you seen?
Yeah, and there are a lot
have you seen how it helps people in their lives?
Yeah, there are a lot of studies about how incredibly effective. I guess effective is the word. Mediumship is in easing grief. And I think I have a very strong code of if I'm getting information, which I don't usually get information about anybody unless they're asking. but I do get a lot of information for myself. So I will not impart information that comes in necessarily. I think it's lovely that you went into meditation to say, what am I supposed to do with this? Because you can be prompted in that way and saying, no, it's very important. And then you can kind of watch and see, well, how important really is it? Or am I just intruding here? And so I get a little uncomfortable about that, partially because I never wanted to tell anybody what I did. I didn't want people to know that I did this, that I could do this. I didn't even know what it was that I was doing. So, but it is, for me, I think the evidential mediumship was a little too restrictive. I think it's an incredible tool for learning how to really get yourself out of the way so that you can hear clearly, so that you can receive clearly. But expanding beyond that is important. Evidential mediums make you stay with the evidence. And if it's not evidence about the person and who they were in the life, then you don't give any information at all. And I just thought, well, then we're missing a lot of information. I mean, scientists say that no information is ever lost. No information. So anything that we felt, we thought, we've experienced, not just us, but animals and trees and everything is in the field and we have access to it. So I thought, well, that's kind of a little, if your mother is coming through to speak with you, not only to let you know that she's still alive, in a different form, that her consciousness still exists. I mean, that's what mediumship is prefaced on, that consciousness continues. But she's not just going to be coming in to tell you the color apron that she used to wear in the kitchen all the time.
Exactly.
She's going to be coming in to talk to you about what's going on right now. And so many times I'll hear, listen, I hear you. I know you're working on this project. What's going on? You're kind of not working on it. Like, can you get busy on this? Because this is really important in your life. And I'm just coming in to tell you, I support you fully on this. And get to work. And people will go, oh my God, I put it off. And I know I shouldn't put it off. You get that kind of thing all the time. And that to me is where the juice is. That's where, and it's not just information coming from a loved one who you knew in this lifetime or from a pet. It's coming from other beings. I mean, it could be angelic beings. It could be ascended masters. I don't know. They don't identify themselves in that way. I can feel a difference in resonance, a difference in a vibrational quality difference, or I can start to lose words. Like I'll be getting information. I don't quite know how to say the words, which indicates kind of this, I say elevated, but I don't necessarily mean like a vertical orientation. It's just, it's more rarefied or something. And so I expand my practice beyond just the strict evidential mediumship for that reason, because I just think we have access to a lot more.
Cool.
One thing, I agree with you. You shouldn't be restricted to evidence on their own. But sometimes if you're working with somebody, they would love to know that you're actually giving the information from their loved ones.
Yes, I agree. The evidence up front is critical, absolutely essential.
And I don't like to go deeper in detail in the evidence part of it. But I find, like you mentioned, there's a lot of information out there, and passing that on is was like, it is for me, what is required of me to pass it on. And that's how I feel it comes in. It's like, it is your responsibility to pass on this information. One time I was talking with someone, and there's I don't know. Anyways, there's no names. There was a baby that passed, and the person was trying to move on into something else, but spirit was continuing to poke. It's like, no, we have to talk about this one.
Yes.
And just to let you know, that it is okay. And I was like, and then the person in front of me kind of like cried a bit and said, oh yeah, this happened, and so on and so forth. It's just a message that needed to come.
Yes. Well, and you're using your own intuition and your own receptivity to know how important that information is to pass through. And that's very important as a medium, to be able to recognize that, because we could jump in and say, oh, I don't really want to talk about this. Or I had a situation where I was seeing two children like on a tightrope, and this was important. This was a father who had come in to relay this information. And I said, these are your children. You have two children. She said, yes, I have two children. And I said, a girl and a boy. And she said, no, two girls. And I kind of went, oh, I must have gotten that wrong. And I kind of skipped over it a little bit, but something felt a little disconnected there. And it wasn't until afterwards, and I kept hearing him say, it's a boy and a girl. Like it's not two girls. Like I was getting it wrong and I passed over it. And it wasn't until afterwards she said, I have a feeling that you were discussing somebody else, this other relationship situation that I'm right in the middle of, and that's a girl and a boy. And I said, that's who he was speaking of, because he wouldn't let me go. He wouldn't let that go. And so that's part of the work, is learning that they know what they're talking about. They know what they're, and we're just the messenger. We're just we're just channeling that information. And as we get really tuned to that, it can be very, very powerful for people.
Absolutely. And the whole point out of all of this is that to trust whatever is passing through, and trust yourself to pass on the message without basically analyzing it, because it's not for us to analyze what is coming through. It is for us to say, okay, well, this is the information and that's the end of it.
Yeah. I say that to people. I say, it's not my job to create the story for you. I don't know what the narrative is. I don't know what any of these things are, but you should know. And that's why we check in to say, do you understand what I'm talking about? And people have to say, yes, I do. Do you know who we're talking to here? And they have to be able to say, yes, I do know who this is. That's very important for the deeper work to really happen. Otherwise, you can't get beyond the skeptic. You can't get beyond the disbelief.
Yeah. See,
go on.
Sorry, one more thing is that sometimes it comes in an actual, a strong voice. If there's something about to happen and you're not supposed to be going somewhere, it's a simple thing. I was once at home and I was going to do something. I said, there's a fire. And I go, but I don't have any candles in the house, so there's nothing. And I have to be back to do my work because I had to prepare certain things for the next morning. And it kept on screaming, there's got to be a fire. And I went to do my stuff. And then when I came back, the whole street was closed, fire trucks, ambulances. And I go, holy cow. And I go, oh my God, I should have took my computer with me. That's the first thing, but it wasn't, it was the building next door, which prevented me from getting into my building and get my stuff. So yeah, sometimes it does come in a strong vibe, or a strong sound, or I don't know how to explain it sometimes, but it's massive. It's like, wake up,
Yeah. Well, and then to listen to that, to say, you know what, something's coming in here. It doesn't make any sense. I don't get it, but I'm going to take my computer anyway. And then it's kind of like, then you get these little signals that, yes, in fact, what you were hearing was something very, that's when the world starts to come together. Like we're not just walking through the world, we're in it, it's just become so much more intimate. And for hundreds of years, we've been teaching that they're separate and there's no connection at all. And it's only now recently that science is starting to say, you know what, we think there's a connection. And they're starting to explore that. And when you experience it in your person, you get these little, I used to get them in the car all the time. It'd be like, okay, stay way to the right over here. Don't way to the right. And sure enough, somebody be coming around. They'd be over the double yellow line. I can't tell you how many times I get that kind of thing.
Because it's a really need to have a lot of synchronicities,
Yes, all the time.
Like whether it's like from a dream or even a daydream, especially when you're driving, sitting in traffic and just something kind of floats in, and you're like, oh, really? And you might discard it initially, but it's persistent then, and you're like, okay, we're paying attention. And I usually announce to the universe, I'm paying attention now.
That's good.
You've got my full attention. What is this? And it really has been fascinating journey when I'm really present and giving everything, whatever is going on, my full attention. Like, so we did a program there a couple of months back, with photographs of ancestors. It was when we were doing the mediumistics. We were doing a whole series of little things last year, and it just would tell us what to do each week, each month. It was like, okay, this is what it looks like. And we weren't kind of the maker-upper of the whole thing, you know what I mean? We were just following the guidance. And so it emerged that we were going to invite people to bring the pictures of the ancestors in. And it's really interesting. Like, it comes very easy. And there was 3 of us working on it, and we kind of set it up. And the day of the program, like, I was meditating, and this ancestor, not even directly on my family, it was my husband's family, right? She was just like hanging out right here. Like, she was like, if I was trying to go here, she was going with me. Like, I was like, all right, then back off. I'm doing my meditation now. And I was like, okay, when I was finished meditating, I was like, what is that? Like, and I really sat with it, and I didn't know her name, but I recognized her from a picture, So I went downstairs and I said to my husband, I think one of your ancestors wants to come on our thing, this afternoon, like our program. And I said, could you get her picture? I need to send it to Kathy. And I said, what's her name? Because I pointed her out. She was very kind of from the late 1800s, I think she was born, so very kind of Victorian kind of looking, hair pulled back, very stern kind of, you wouldn't mess with her, when she shows up in your meditation. And when I submitted the photo to Kathy and Ramsey, I said, put her at the back now. And look, we probably won't do her at all because, there'll be more people with their ancestors. So we're going to, focus on the people that are coming in.
Yes.
And Ramsey said, oh, we'll tune into her afterwards if we have time later, And I said, oh, yeah, grand. Well, I don't know how she managed this, but Kathy got all the pictures mixed up. And so we said, put up the first picture of the first ancestor. And there she was. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. I couldn't believe it.
That's the trickster.
That's it.
That kind of mix up is a classic trickster sort of.
And and then they lost track at the time. I was practically texting them going, do you realize we've given this 10 minutes? We had said we do about 7, because we were trying to plan out the program. It was an hour and a half. She took up anyway about the first 20 minutes. And I couldn't even validate the information people were picking up on her because I didn't know enough about her. But the following week, I was traveling to Estonia, where she was from. And this was all synchronistic. It was like almost accidental. The first hotel that we stayed in, I don't know that country, it was my first time there, and it was really randomly selected. And I said, we better check that ancestry book. I think are your family from near here, or is it far? Where should we travel? We were trying to figure it out. Anyway, it turns out she was born, she got married, her whole life happened about 5 minutes from the hotel we were staying in. And her name kept coming up during the day on the name of a house. The amount of things that happened that whole day, she was like, I'm here,
Was there something that she wanted to say? Was there, did you discern anything of why she was being so insistent?
I
Was
felt
did she
that
just want to be
she
present?
wanted us to acknowledge her, because the book that my husband was translating by his grandfather, she was his grandfather's mother. And from what I could read in between the lines as we were translating the book, he was really after going into all of her old diaries and she really wanted to be a journalist, but at the time she couldn't be. So, but she kept huge records. And he kind of towards just before the war happened, he took off, I think soon after she passed away, he must have wanted to do something with all of his mother's, notes and her notebooks. And I felt like when I was listening to his words, they weren't really his, because he was talking about people that he couldn't have possibly known, in real detail. And I think she wanted us to kind of know that in fact, what we'd been translating and listening to was a lot of information about the family that she had been recording.
Very interesting.
So, yeah. And it really made all of us pay attention for that whole week, as we were kind of retracing their steps. So if they want to be known, they will come on in.
Yeah.
They'll take, I think Ramsey had something similar. He was sharing it last week about when his grandmother showed up, like the matriarchs and families are they mean business when they show up, I think.
Well, and oftentimes that's so funny that you should say that. I've never really thought of that. But when the women show up, and I say, I've got your grandmother here, sometimes I say, I've got your grandmother here. Let's sit up and take notice. There is something there about that that's very curious. I'm going to pay a little bit closer attention to that. And it feels a little bit different with the guys. But the matrilineal is like this really iron strong sort of presence.
Yeah, that was my grandmother. It's right over here. It's like
Very good.
Yeah.
Krista.
Yes.
I have a different question now. It's regarding you're it's not a dream weaver, but you're a dream decipherer.
Yeah.
In a way.
Facilitator. I would say facilitator.
Facilitator. Okay.
Yeah.
In the dream world, how does it relate, or if it doesn't relate, to the awakened state? And are they linked? And is there spirit in between? Or how does this whole thing kind of work?
My interpretation of it is that your dream consciousness is just on the spectrum of consciousness. And so waking consciousness is on that spectrum, and daydreaming is on that spectrum, and a slight altered state of consciousness. You're out in nature and you're lying on the green grass looking up at the sky. That's another sort of consciousness, which to me it's all receptivity. It's just how we're engaged in the reception. And so the dream consciousness, I think, is really interesting because there's no logical reasoning there at all. That's totally quieted. And the symbolism that comes through the dreams is it's a fascinating way to start to learn the language of, I would say, the language of spirit, or the language of that milieu. I don't know what the word is. And, and then you have altered states. You have altered states caused by ingestion of drugs, ayahuasca, DMT, psilocybin. And then you have very deep dream states. You have lucid dream states. And I think that these are just all on a continuum, and we experience all of them. But in my understanding and through my studies, and what the theory that was very attractive to me was Carl Jung and Wolfgang Pauli had kind of started thinking about this really in the 50s. This idea is called dual aspect monism. And it's the idea that there is just one thing. And what happens is our consciousness syncs with that one thing. And when the symmetry of that breaks, out of that comes mind and matter. Those come out of out of the dissolution of the symmetry that is always there, comes mind and matter. And so that's where I think it's just all one thing. And we're just experiencing it and aware of it at different levels and in different ways. And different information could get through at different levels. What comes through a dream, you wouldn't necessarily be able to access through a daydream or through a sort of reverie. Like it needs the dream consciousness to get that messaging through. So that's my interpretation of it. I hope that was clear.
Krista, would you mind telling us about the dream, from what I understand, that came through you, that led to you becoming the contributing author on Quantum Psyche II?
In the Quantum Psyche.
That
was a very interesting situation, because I was writing my dissertation and I was looking for the physical way that this happens. Like it's happening in the real world. It's not just happening in my mind. It's impacting my real world. How does that happen? That's what I wanted to know. And so I kind of went down a rabbit hole, and in tracing how this works through neuropsychology, through behavioral science, through all of these different disciplines. And it led me to the quantum world, to entanglement. And so I happened upon a paper way late in my writing of the dissertation. It was in neuroquantology. I am not a scientist. I'm not a mathematician. I'm just a person who's curious about what's happening to me. And it was a mathematical proof of mind-matter entanglement, this dynamic of mind-matter entanglement, kind of based on the Jung-Pauli conjecture, and which I was familiar with. So I was like, oh yeah, this is it. This is what in my intuition, I thought, this is the Holy Grail. I've got it. Finally, I have found somebody that's going to be telling me how this works. And it's a mathematical proof, even better. But it was 11 pages of C algebra math. I don't do math. I don't even add. I do ratios. Forget about it. So I was completely lost, and I couldn't even understand the language in the description, because they were talking about Hamiltonians and eigenvalues, and I didn't know what any of that was. For me, it was pure nonsense. But I toiled for probably about 2 months trying to figure this out, just reading it, rereading it. It wasn't happening. And so I finally had to give it up, because I had to finish. I was at the end of the dissertation. And it was a day or two after I said, you know what, I got to move on. I'm not going to get it from here. I'm not going to know. It's lost. I don't know that. And I had a nightmare, really big nightmare, to the type where you wake up in a sweat and, like, oh my God, you're right in the middle of this thing. And because of my dream work with Robert Moss, I know to write the dream exactly how the dream came, every little aspect of the dream, no extraneous information. So that's what I did. But I thought the dream was premonitional. I thought it was curvy mountain roads and car crashes. And I thought, I better drive carefully over these next couple of days. So that's what I thought it was. Never even thinking until a couple of weeks after I had the nightmare that everything in the nightmare, that it was like a film being made to show me the dynamic of what Carminati and his co-authors were proving out in their mathematical proof about mind-matter entanglement. And I thought, that's the craziest thing I've ever thought. But you know what? I'm going to trace it out. I'm going to see if this is true, if this dream actually does correspond with this paper. And it took me about a month to really kind of finesse it. I thought, okay, this is a great chapter for the dissertation, but I have to send it to Carminati, who is a physicist at CERN. And I thought, if I'm wrong, the dissertation committee is going to I'm going to fail. That would be a big F. That's nice. You had a nice dream about this, but it doesn't mean anything because it's not doing what you say it's doing. So I knew I had to send it to him, and I was very intimidated, but I sent it to him. And he got back to me within 24 hours, I think, like right away. And he said, you know what? Everything was absolutely correct. That narrative that your dream gave you is exactly what we were describing in this mathematical proof. So I almost went, no, this can't be right. Like, really? Like, this really works like this? Like, I was just kind of had a theory about it, and now it was like, now your theory, my theory had kind of been proved out by a dream. I was astounded that was actually right. And so I think that they were working on this book. They had done quantum. I think it was Quantum Psyche I, and this was Quantum Psyche II. And he had asked if he could put that in the book. So that was huge for me. That was the real turning point about, what, this stuff that we think we're making up is real. This really works.
And so you had studied with Robert Moss before that.
Yeah, I did a lot of coursework with him, and I did his teacher training work, and I loved working with Robert. He's just incredible. He has a very shamanic approach to the dream work, which I really fed into, that kind of moving into the field, and that idea that we're being informed by way more than we think. And I really give kudos to Robert's work, because I think it freed all of that up for me to actually, for that information to come through my dreams, because I'd entertain it. Like, they kind of knew, oh, you know what? She'll get this eventually. She'll let's just give her this dream and see if she picks up on it. Which I did, but it took me, and my logical reasoning mind was very resistant when I kind of got the idea that this was, these were connected, the dream and this paper. My logical reason mind said, that's ridiculous. That's the most ridiculous. What are you going to spend a month writing this out? It's not right. You're not even going to. So I had this kind of back and forth between my rational self and my, this could actually be really cool. This might work, and my dream might have actually informed me. And so I'm glad I listened to that side, the right side of my brain, rather than the left side, because it really, and that I hit the send button too. I did not want to do that. So that was very courageous, and that worked out.
Can I just ask it I'm trying to really grasp how this worked. So the dream obviously happens in a split second or in a short space of time, like all the detail, and let's call it the nightmare. And so the next morning you wake up and you're recapitulating the whole dream state. And so you're writing it down as it's coming back to you, or did you write it down over a couple of days, or how did you record it?
Yeah, sometimes you just get a little snippet. I mean, a nightmare is a nightmare because you're supposed to remember it. And a nightmare, you remember everything. Usually it's not like a regular dream where you're kind of like, what happened there? It's very, very specific. And so right away, I knew, like all the pieces were coming in. And this is why it's really great to write your dreams, because as you begin to write them, more pieces come in and you start to get more specific. And so my training was to be as specific as you possibly can, because every symbol, every kind of trajectory, narrative trajectory, means something. And it means multiple different things. Nothing just means one thing. You can look at it from multiple ways and get multiple meanings. So I just wrote everything exactly how it happened. I was on a curvy mountain road and there were all these vehicles coming in and everybody was driving like crazy. I was thinking, I got to protect myself here. This is ridiculous. And then this big roadmaster comes by, like it had this whole big narrative, and to the point where the cars crash and then a body flies apart. It was a crazy nightmare dream. And I did artwork for it. So in the book, they have the artwork of the actual visuals of the dream. And then I break it all apart with what all of the things, kind of how they corresponded. So that was a lot of work. But for me, I needed that to almost prove to myself that this stuff is real. Because I was a skeptic. I was always kind of on the fence, like, really? Am I just making this up? And when you're in mediumship training, sometimes your sitters are very kind. You're giving information. They go, oh, well, I don't know. Well, maybe that works. And so sometimes you're not always certain if what you're getting is actually was being given. And that's where the training comes in. Practice, practice, practice.
I wish we had more time.
Oh, good. Oh, this went so fast.
I know. But quick one. So what would you tell the listeners? Jot everything down or jot it and review it every day. How should they go
well,
about
with dreams, definitely, if you can write them down, it can feel kind of onerous because it can take a little while. I just go through them in my head and I re-enter them as if they're totally happening right now and bring them very present. And if there's somebody that handed me a piece of paper in my dream and I don't know what was on the piece of paper, I go back into the dream to see what was on the piece of paper, that sort of thing. Dream re-entry is a really good way to do it. And then to just honor the dream, like the shamanic shopping part of it. Yeah. Because then you're telling the field of consciousness with a capital C that you're listening. Yes. And if they know you're listening, they're going to keep talking, whoever they are. And that's where it starts to become very fluid. And, in the end, you just become you start to feel very balanced. And you're in your life. Your life isn't just happening to you. You're in it and you're making it happen. And you're acting on things and you're honoring and you're thanking. And that's how I think it works in a very beautiful way. So writing the dreams is good. Writing your synchronicities to remember that. Some little hits that you get, I think my mother's going to call, and then my mother calls, it's like, oh, okay, that really worked. Just to keep a journal of that because it reminds you. And then when you start to look at it, you say, wow, look at how often this is happening. Because otherwise it's just, you don't really recognize the dynamic of it. So the writing is very, very helpful.
Okay, basically, once you put them all together, sorry, Susie, I just jumped in. When you put them all together, it gives you this sense of being part of the field, being part of the consciousness, so that you can basically move along with it on your day-to-day life.
We have to understand that we're participating. It's not just happening to us, we're participating with it. And this kind of work starts you into the understanding of how to participate and to work with it.
Yeah. Will you be doing some of your dream navigations in the Girl's Guide to the World? I'm
doing a retreat in Todos Santos, Mexico. I did one in Fiji last year, and this is Todos Santos. So that's dream work and mediumship work. Cool. And I'm doing something at the Chautauqua in New York in July. With my friend Ed Olson on kind of working in this way and bringing it into the corporate level, like into your business and your life. And how do you kind of entertain the liminal in these environments that don't necessarily, you don't think that they're there when in fact they are. And so that I'll be doing it at the Chautauqua Institute in July.
When is that? Is that later
That's
this
in
month?
July. I think it's the
Yeah.
second week in July. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh my God, Krista, you're going to have to come back.
I would love to
I
come
just
back.
feel like we could talk about. I could do a whole other hour on the dream. I
Yeah,
am so
well, and
fascinated
that
about
would be great, you know, and
Yeah.
I love to dive deep into this stuff. So, and then I think that that's what's helpful for people.
Yeah.
So they get a taste, and then maybe we can go deeper.
That's
Definitely.
that's a plan.
Good.
Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you inviting me.
This
Well,
was
we
the
were actually
quickest hour
overly
ever.
excited when you said yes.
Oh,
Well-
Ramsey, will I just mention quickly that tomorrow we're doing Tea with the Ancestors. It's
Yes.
Friday. It's the 25th, and it's at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, and 5 Ireland. And you can come along and bring a photo and a cup of tea and a notebook maybe. And we're going to sit and we're going to do something very precious with the ancestors tomorrow. So you can log in for that. You can register online on the in12d website. And if you want to get €6 off, you can put in subscribed with the D at the end as on the coupon code, and you can get a little discount. So that's my little plug-in for today. Sorry.
No,
Thanks.
that's all good. Thank you all for joining us. Hopefully, whoever's joining us tomorrow, we'll see you tomorrow. And the ones that are not joining us tomorrow, we'll see you next Thursday. Please do like and subscribe to our podcast so that you don't miss out on awesome discussions with great guests like Krista today. For that, we say goodbye for today, and we'll see you next Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard, 7 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time.